Welcome to another edition of Bianchi Law Talk every Sunday at 5 o'clock. And it's my privilege to come forward to you guys, and I really appreciate all the great responses you've all given to these informal talks that complement the media hits that I do during the week. And on the Law and Crime Network, we were specifically dealing this week with my friend Julio Briones, who I see is on, and Mike Corbanix. The Jason Van Dyke police murder case was a former officer out of Chicago who had been on trial for having shot and killed Laquan McDonald, a 16-year-old boy. He went to trial and he was convicted. But that's part of the story. The other part of the story is that 3 other police officers will be on trial starting this week. We'll cover gavel-to-gavel coverage at the Law and Crime Network for having falsified reports in order to make it more palatable, if you will, or to help out their fellow police officer at the time, Jason Van Dyke. And they're on trial now for conspiracy and obstruction of justice and falsification of reports, up to and including trying to get witnesses to indicate that the young man was actually trying to attack Officer Van Dyke, which clearly the motor vehicle recordings and body cam video show was not accurate. So now here are these guys, this thin blue wall, and listen, I'm a cop supporter. Everyone knows that. But I was also very strong with internal affairs practices when I was the county prosecutor, and I did that for a number of reasons. It wasn't that internal affairs should be used as a hammer against police officers. It was actually, and the message that I gave to the officers was to improve policing, to get retraining where it needed to be done, and to try to save an officer's career so that you don't wind up in the position of Jason Van Dyke and his fellow officers who are going to go to state prison in all likelihood for a very long time for the cover-up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. There's links in this video right now you can go to where I wrote an article, an opinion piece on the Law and Crime Network, and also in there is both here and in the article itself is a link to an interview that I had done with the Chief of Police Chris Wagner from the Denville Police Department, Mike Corbanix, and Gene Rossi from the Law and Crime Network. And I thought that Chris Wagner had a lot of very interesting comments to me, because when I was prosecutor, I had to actually investigate a police shooting fatality in his department. And personally, I think he handled it like a pro with respect to the manner in which he allowed our office to do what we needed to do without any pushback or without any kind of resistance, which happens in cases like this. So part of the question at the Law and Crime Network that we answered in a segment that I do every week on Mondays and Wednesdays, where I host from 12 to 3, is called Flip That Script. And Mike Corbanix asked, what about this delicate balance of power that occurs between prosecutors and police? I mean, in many ways, we have to work with the police, and we do work with the police, and most officers do an excellent job. We try to eradicate crime, arrest, and prosecute to keep the community safe. But as a prosecutor, you also have the oversight responsibility for making sure that the cops are complying with the law. Many people don't realize, but if you look at every level of law enforcement in our country, all the way from the top jobs in the federal government all the way down to the state and municipal courts, there is always a civilian authority, typically a lawyer, that is actually in charge of all of law enforcement. And as the county prosecutor, I had 44 police agencies that I supervised and I was in charge with, because I was the civilian authority to make sure that they're operating in a constitutional manner. So what was the message that I gave to the cops? Hey, great internal affairs, great training, retraining, finding cops who are on the precipice of a problem not only saves careers, saves cops from going to jail, saves cops from losing jobs, but obviously protects the community who is at risk for cops, the few cops that are out there that are errant in what they do. Hey, when I did civil rights work, I actually had cases where cops had 70 and 80 internal complaints filed that were never sustained. And it wasn't until it hit the fan that all of a sudden it came out about the failure of the department to have an effective and robust internal affairs system that could have probably interdicted way before all of this to help those cops before they got themselves jammed up. And as a prosecutor, I've investigated and prosecuted cops who have done things that were inappropriate. And again, not all by any stretch of imagination. It's only a minority, a very small minority of police officers, but you could see where it came from. failure to be able to monitor them, and arrogance with respect to the level of power that they have, and then ultimately those who take advantage of those things, those police officers that did that, find themselves in a real jam and then are in shock when they're being prosecuted or being thrown off the departments for improper tactics. So I'm very interested in your opinions about this. These 3 police officers that are going to be going on trial in the Chicago case that tried to cover for Jason Van Dyke, you know, there's something about this that we've been discussing. Jason Van Dyke confronted a scenario. He shot and killed a 16-year-old boy. There was a lot of debate as to whether or not it was an appropriate use of force or not. Now, the jury has spoken in that case. But one thing as a prosecutor that I would be bringing out with these 3 police officers who falsified reports and tried to get others to falsify reports is this was not a split-second decision that Jason Van Dyke confronted. This was not a situation in which maybe he just lost control and shot a kid who clearly was not a danger to that officer. But nevertheless, he was making a split-second decision. When hours later you were engaged in a process of covering that up and falsifying police reports, you've engaged in a very deliberate level of conduct that has to be addressed. And my point to my police officer friends, and got the Bianchi Law Group, we represent a number of police officers, many of whom are very, very good people that found themselves in very difficult circumstances, is there's no longer an environment for covering up for people and falsifying police reports. As I wrote in the Law and Crime article where the link is attached, being able to write reports truthfully and testify truthfully is an essential component of a police officer. And now, more and more jurisdictions are saying, in New Jersey in particular, I helped rewrite the Attorney General guidelines in 2011, that if an officer is found to have been untruthful in their official position, that is a tag that goes on them for the rest of their careers, because defense attorneys should be entitled to be able to use that information to cross-examine. In other words, if you falsified something before or were dishonest, you may have falsified something here and are dishonest. In the past, that never was released in discovery in a criminal case, but it is now. So effectively, an officer becomes unusable. And again, testifying and writing reports is an essential component to the prosecution piece of not only arresting, but getting convictions. So if an officer has lied or been found to have been dishonest, it could be a career ender, not to mention it could be official misconduct, obstruction, and the other kinds of charges that are facing the officers in the Jason Van Dyke follow-up trial on Monday. Hey guys, listen, I really appreciate your support. I'm interested in your thoughts and commentary. Go to that link and listen to the interview on Flip That Script that we did with Chris Wagner and Mike Corbanix. And also, and I know Julio's on here, and I'll try to answer some of these questions I see coming up. Julio Briones, my friend, is a prison consultant, also has a video that we have up on our social media that I think is really fascinating in terms of what does Jason Van Dyke, or for that matter, any police officer's life look like in state prison when they're convicted. It is a bleak tale, worse than it would ordinarily be for other people. And he had served a state prison sentence, Julio, and so he is nobody better than him as a subject matter expert to tell you what that is going to look like. So Mark D'Annunzio, my friend, you're always supporting us, and I greatly appreciate it. And Julio, I see you are there as well. And Chris Wagner, again, Chief, you did a phenomenal job on that interview. It went off the hook on social media. The link is right here in this description. I was really proud of that interview. It was great to be working back with you again, Chief, in a different capacity, certainly. So, and so I see Jana D'Alessandro is writing, about damn time. I can't really make out what's being said there. Let's see. I still feel Van Dyke lied. This is Joanna, about the lunged a part of his case where the video clearly shows he didn't. Yeah, hey, listen, that's a great point. So what she's referring to there is that what happened, I'm sorry, Joanna, right. What happened there was that Van Dyke got on the witness stand and testified. His testimony was probably the worst I've ever seen of a criminal defendant in a case. And clearly what he was saying that was happening, that the young man had lunged towards him or represented a danger, was belied by the motor vehicle recordings and the body cam videos that they had. I mean, you could sit there and say, I freaked out, I lost control, I thought he could spin around, maybe he had a gun. You know, those are all things that you would expect would be said and be consistent with what I've seen other people say. But when he's sitting in front of a jury and say, don't believe your lying eyes, to reference the Groucho Marx routine. I think that he worked his way into an absolute conviction. And we talked a lot about that on the Law and Crime Network as to if he did not take the stand, is it possible that one juror may have said, again, jurors are typically cop friendly in a lot of these cases. We've seen that. Could one juror have said, hey, I'm not going to convict this cop based upon everything that went on, all the moving pieces of that night, that Laquan was on PCP, he was carrying a knife, he punctured a police tire, and I'm just not doing it? Or did that testimony that he gave, which was clearly not consistent with the facts of the case, that was at the nail in his coffin? And we've been debating that, Joanna, for quite a while. So, hey, listen, guys, we really appreciate you supporting Bianchi Law Talk every Sunday at 5 o'clock. If you find this interesting, I'd really appreciate you sharing it and going on to our YouTube channel and subscribing at Bianchi Law Talk, as aptly put. I hope you have a great week. Please leave your commentary there. Let me know what you think about what's going on. And if you get a chance, check out that article that I wrote for Law and Crime. And I'll be hosting tomorrow from 12 to 3 and hosting on Wednesday from 12 to 3. Those are my regular gigs. People ask, how can I find this when I'm on the run during the course of the day? Hey, well, you can go on the Law and Crime Network, and it literally live streams from the website. That's lawandcrime.com. It's a Dan Abrams production. This network is going off the hook. It's exploding, and they have all these OTT platforms like Pluto TV. If you go on the website, it'll show you, how you can find it. Apple TV, YouTube TV. I don't really know all those. I just go right on the website and check it out there. So have a great week, guys. I really appreciate you watching, and we'll be back next week, Sunday, 5 o'clock, for another Bianchi Law Talk. You be well.